where God dwells, it will be impossible to know him. God has existed aeons before time was created. It was impossible for God to be known. Paul was speaking and Paul said he dwells in light that is unapproachable. In fact, I've taught you before many times that the concept of the throne of God is not a seat. God is a spirit. He doesn't need a seat. The concept of the throne of God, number one, is a revelation of authority. And number two, is a revelation of a technology in the spirit that God created to make it possible for creation to interact with him. So what happens on the throne of God is that God decides to reveal different dimensions of his deity per time. When John entered the throne room, he saw that God was clothed with crystals. And those of you that have done a little bit of physics, you understand that crystals do two things. Number one, they reflect, and number two, they refract. The reason diamond glisters is because when light passes through the diamond, the crystals bend it and refract a measure of the light that enters the diamond. You see, God is light and God cannot be approached. But in order for the heavenly beings to have the privilege of interacting with different dimensions of God, he had to clothe himself with crystals, and he created a throne where his dimensions can manifest per time. And so what the 24 elders do is that when they see a dimension, they hallow it. They fall on their faces and worship it. When they look up again and they want to sit down, they see another dimension, they hallow it. When they stand up to sit down, they see another dimension, they hallow it. So the reason they are falling on their faces is because every time they look up, they see a new dimension. And that has continued for billion aeons unending. So it is impossible for the totality of God to be interacted with per time. Now, the technology of man is an attempt of God to create a vessel that can host the fullness of deity. So when Jesus came, Jesus was actually an attempt of God, because he cannot be interacted with per time. An attempt of God of hosting the totality of deity, so that when you see Christ, you see all of the dimensions of Christ. So Christ did not just come to show us a part or a dimension of God. He came to reveal the fullness of deity. The writings of John was an attempt to reveal the different components of deity that is in Christ, because John was the one that knew him more than every other of the disciples on account of his intimacy with Christ. This being that heaven cannot trap has been trapped in a man called Christ. And my attempt in writing the gospel is to show you the fullness of God. I am not about telling you how Jesus was born, how Jesus walked through Nazareth, how Jesus died necessarily. I am here to tell you that when you open Christ, there are different layers, there are different dimensions, there are different realms. That Christ is not just a person, Christ is the fullness of deity.